NBA basketball fans, welcome back to the NBA Playoff Banter podcast. He's Marshall, I'm Chris, and we're here to talk some NBA Finals. Obviously, we're fresh off Game 3, and from just a fan's perspective or media perspective, not a fan of the Bucks or Suns, individually. It's nice last night that not only did the Bucks win, but they won going away 120 to 100. Very dominant performance, especially sometime in the late third quarter. They just took off and never looked back. Giannis, these last two games, my goodness gracious, if he keeps this up, he's going to have one of the better final stat lines of anyone. I'm not saying he can go for 40 again, come Wednesday, but he's come a long way. We talked about that last podcast and even the podcast before. He's come a long way from the early goings of that Brooklyn Nets series where it looked like, wow, dude, are we going to have to kind of reevaluate where Giannis is as far as ranking in the NBA, because he's getting exploited badly. But we gave him a lot of credit for pulling out of it, and he has put that stuff in his rear view. Even last night with the free throws, this guy was a maniac when it came to free throws. So we're going to break down Game 3, going to kind of look ahead to the next few games and see what we think. I think my co-host Marshall had the Suns in 5. I had the Suns in 6. Being that Giannis was there, I would have said 5, and I don't know if he said it was going to be a sweep without Giannis, but thank goodness, it was a buzzkill in many ways with all these injuries, right? But thank goodness, and I'm talking about the NBA playoffs overall, but thank goodness Giannis was able to come back from an injury that, even if he came back, I wasn't sure how he was going to look. Even Game 1, if you look at his stat line, you're like, hey, pretty good. But in the second half, he started getting a little limpy and gimpy, and there's some times when he goes down where, of course, he could feel it a little bit. And I'd really probably say, like, vertically and running just straight ahead, I think he's good to go. When he's, especially in those early games, Game 1 especially, side to side, horizontal, however you want to put it, you could see he wasn't as quick as he was, which, hey, the fact that he's on the court playing was awesome. But these last two games, the only time you see him really favoring it is, he'll kind of go to the bench and walk it off or whatever. It's going to be that kind of minor injury now, because obviously he can play with it. So that is phenomenal news. And you could tell by Game 2, now that people knew Giannis was playing, you could see Game 2. We haven't gotten the ratings exactly from Game 3 just yet, but you could tell they're kind of inching up. So it was nice that we have a 2-1 series. Of course, we'll talk about last night's game, kind of break it down in chunks. Just kind of breezed by the first two games because, it's been a while now since they've been, so we're not going to go in too much detail. But if this is your first time listening to the NBA Playoff Banter podcast, welcome. It streams live right here on blogtalkradio.com/Rope-A-Dope Radio. You don't have to go to Blog Talk and Rope-A-Dope and download the show directly there or listen to the browser if you don't want. You can find this here NBA podcast under the Rope-A-Dope Radio umbrella at iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Player FM, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spreaker, almost across the board. We're also part of the Grueling True Sports Podcast Network, which can be found in a whole lot of places. While you're at it, why don't you head on over to thegruelingtruth.com. It's basketball, football, boxing, baseball, hockey, everything in between. And one more thing, if you're thinking about cutting the cord or you're not quite happy, I got something for you. It's called AT&T TV. The plans start as low as $69.99 a month. Simple pricing, no hidden fees, no annual contract. You can stream it anywhere on any device. The cloud DVR is available. And if you sign up for the choice package or above, you get a free year of HBO Max. That's AT&T TV. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host Marshall and kind of check his temperature, see how he's doing. He's been in town. He's usually based in Texas now, but he's been in town for a little while. He's actually taken off on a plane down south in a little bit here. What's going on, Marshall? How you doing, man?
I'm having a good day. Had a nice little summer getaway, so it's always fun to go back and see family and friends. Now you get back to more of regular life, I suppose. But yeah, I can't complain. And yeah, it's about to be the time of the year we're about to be just on baseball. Like we've been talking about so many sports, and we especially with the COVID bubble, Chris, we had like sports galore. Now we're about to be kind of, I
Well,
guess, in
I'd
a
say
way.
UFC and boxing have a little bit more to say about that, but that's
Oh,
something different. That's something
that's true for the main
different.
four. For the main four, hell, Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup 2 times in less than 1 year of days. So we're getting back to being on track a little bit. But in the UFC thing, that was going crazy over Twitter a couple of nights ago, obviously too, with Poirier winning again on an ankle snap. But nonetheless, yeah, we still got a fun series though. It didn't go 3-0, so that is a positive just for ratings and whatnot. I guess people should have known that the Suns were going to lose game 3 simply due to Scott Foster. Because whenever Scott Foster's officiated a playoff game in Chris Paul's career,
Yeah.
Chris Paul's never won. Now, you could say that's pure speculation, pure luck. I mean,
Well, it's not speculation. That's facts.
yeah, you're right. But I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot into that. Now, as you did learn from when that Donahue I actually listened to a podcast about him, about his whole trouble. And he said, there's some player. I mean, he's like, refs are human. Like, there's some refs that don't like certain players, and all the refs know about that. So maybe there is a correlation that Scott Foster doesn't like Chris Paul. Obviously, he's for 12 games in a row, it hasn't worked out too well. But I saw ESPN run that story last night.
And he's the crew chief, too. He's the crew chief, too.
Yeah. And so I was kind of joking with my buddies. I'm like, dude, I guess we should just bet Milwaukee because Chris Paul can't win with Scott Foster's the crew chief of a game. And that turned out to be true again. So, again, I think there's a little more to break down than that. But it is weird for a very talented player to go 0-12 when a certain ref is on the court. It's like, I guess maybe he's not a Chris Paul fan. Maybe he doesn't like those insurance commercials that Chris Paul does or something. Who knows? But but yeah.
I mean, I think it's probably deeper than that.
Probably so.
There could be some other things into that he doesn't like about it. You know what I mean? But just from a fan's perspective, it is nice to have that series, 2-1. It just makes you feel like you're looking forward to game 4. And in game 5, obviously, there's a 5th game now, and there's a good chance at a game 6. So I think overall, I think the league likes it because, you're like, okay, finally they won a game here, and they're all healthy. Everybody's healthy as far as their stars. You're going to lose some players. Saric went out and all that, but it was definitely good, and especially how dominant they were. It's funny when you look at game 1 and game 2, Marshall. It was a competitive game in the first half in both of the games, and the Suns found a way to get like an 8 or 10 or 9 point lead in both of them. Like I said, you did see Giannis a little gimpy at times in that first game, a lot more than these other two, that's for sure. The Bucks would make like a decent run, but then Chris Paul just kind of took over. The Suns closed it out. Like I said, same thing. Like the Bucks were up a bit, actually, even a little bit more, seemingly in game 2. But then, and Giannis was just going off and all that. But Booker and Paul doing work, really, really doing damage. You know what I mean? I think they got it to like 5 or 6 points at some point. But the Bucks did. But the Suns, whether it's just clutch shots by Paul and Booker. We talked about the pick and roll. I'm sure we'll go into depth about that a little bit more on this one. That was obviously previewing the series last Monday. The Suns' ball movement through game 1 and game 2 was really, really good. And them making free throws was just clutch. So to me, it kind of felt like I didn't think it'd be a sweep, but all of a sudden, I'm like, man, they were pretty dominant. And it's not like Milwaukee played bad. Now, sure, you could point fingers to the number 2 and number 3 guy on the rosters, right? Something you couldn't do in Game 3. But it was just nice for them, like I said, to tie up the series. But it was kind of funny how Game 1 and Game 2 kind of played out the same, very similar. And on the flip side, Game 3 kind of had a life of its own. Booker struggled as well.
Yeah, and part of it really simply is that it's super hard to ever see sweeps in the finals. I mean, I'm not saying that like this was a game that if you play 100 times, like the Bucks win 90, but these are two competitive teams. This is a Suns team that we've said throughout all of our podcasts that no one thought they'd quite get here. And hell, I even remember the Warriors, like when they had their run with like against LeBron. There was that one year where they really wanted to sweep because the year before they got for sweep and they couldn't pull it off. Like sweeps are hard to pull off, especially when a team goes up 2-0. You're gonna get the team's best chance at home. And as we were talking about before the podcast started, Milwaukee's home crowd has done about all you simply can do for a fan base. It looks like they have 30,000 people outside the arena in like a massive parking lot, crazy party. And the inside arena.
There's two different spots now too because of the overflow. So they literally do have more people outside than in.
I mean, that fan base is doing all they can.
It's like a Grateful Dead show. Sorry.
Yeah. So I mean, you got to give them credit. Like again, I could easily see the Suns winning Game 4, but in Game 3, your backs are against the wall. Fan base has been good. Your role players have truly enjoyed a good home court advantage, whether it's been against the Heat or against the Nets or against the Suns now. Like everything kind of added up, and the ref story, of course, last night. But everything was looking towards, okay, like we got to come back and win. So that's why when that game did start last night, I really was surprised because normally when you do have the back against the wall down 0-2 game, you see a team, Chris, normally get off to a really good start. And watch that first quarter, it really I'm not saying Milwaukee played bad, but it was just trading buckets back and forth. And even for most of the second quarter, it was pretty much mini run, like back and forth. I was like, damn. I'm like, I was truly surprised the Suns like kind of like just were able to take the punches, and they did. But in the second half, eventually the Bucks made their run. Yeah, it was a game they had to have. And Giannis, who, again, for an injury that looked like, I don't know, initially, and again, I know nothing about being a doctor, but when you saw that knee kind of pop out of whatever, and it wasn't looking good, you're like, oh, dude, he's out for the rest of the playoffs. It's like, oh, man, that's really unfortunate. And thankfully with their trainers and whatever, and obviously it wasn't as bad as it looked, that guy's really come back and had a really, really good performance for, as you said, a couple of games in a row. So you're right. It is fun to have a nice series. It was nice to see Milwaukee answer. I mean, I think everything is going kind of as expected so far. And you can also, Chris, turn to that quote of a series doesn't truly start until a road team wins. Now, I firmly believe that quote's going to be cashed in here soon. But yeah, as you said, for Game 3, again, credit for Phoenix for keeping that initial spurt on chill. And then credit to Milwaukee too. I mean, when you go into halftime, you're like, dude, like we thought we'd be up like 15 or 20 and we're pretty much throwing punches back and forth with them. Like, are we going to have that run? I'm sure, especially if you were a Milwaukee fan last night, you're thinking like, this is a 4-point game. Like, do we got to start maybe worrying about the sweep? But Milwaukee went on a run, and that's something that, to give them credit, this is something kind of hard to do nowadays too, with as often and as easy as elite players do score, because this is not everyone can score in the NBA. That's a stupid old wives' tale, because it ain't true. You just see the best guys in the world do it and make it look easy. But in the past handful of series, Milwaukee's pretty much had a 15 to 16 point run in probably like their past 5 out of 7 games, which is, I shouldn't not, but maybe about 4 out of 8. But they had it against the Nets, they had it against Atlanta, and they've had it now. And again, that's really something that, sure, maybe again with Curry and Klay Thompson, you could see runs like that happen because you could get a bunch of threes. But for the most part, teams normally don't go on those kind of runs, Chris. And whether it's been Giannis leading it or Middleton doing it a couple of games where Giannis was out, this team has had some patches where they've literally they've played the best basketball in the league for 5-6 minute stretches. They've been doing it now almost every other game. And that's a compliment because, again, you really don't see many 16-0 runs, and they've been putting those up pretty regularly, which, again, obviously is a sign of respect for how good of a team they are.
Yeah, and just that is a good point. And just kind of going over some of the stuff from Game 3, both Giannis and Ayton had a good start. He was like 6 of 7 early on. Ayton really, really quick out the gate. It was kind of weird with Giannis. He left the game early all of a sudden, like earlier than he normally did. He sat down on the bench. And he thought, is he okay? And then all of a sudden he was walking around, kind of keeping it loose. Came back, and he started, I think, 4 of 6 or 5 of 7 from the field. He was getting his teammates involved as well. Booker had that slow start. It was 28-24 at the end of the first. And like you said, all of a sudden the Suns had a really good start to the second quarter. And I was like, oh, wow. This is not kind of like what you're saying. This is not what I was expecting. Just seeing them play, too, like they missed some wide open shots. They missed a layup here and there. There was just some things where you're like, dude, they should have the lead. And then somewhere in the midway through the second quarter, the Bucks went on a 14-2 run. It was 44-38. You thought, okay, here we go. Giannis was up to like 18 points. The lead was like 60-45 after a while. Middleton had 15 points, 5 assists. In the first half, Portis was producing solid minutes, both in the first and second. And then early second, Ayton goes down, 4 fouls, right? Of just I don't know, maybe even 2 minutes into the third quarter. And I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And the broadcast team talked about, okay, Cam Johnson is coming off the bench. It's going to be a good offensive lineup. They're going to score, but will they make them pay because of, the presence that Ayton brings? And they did. Although Cam came in and did a lot of good stuff, actually, and he sparked off the bench, played really well, that 15-point lead, surprisingly enough, got down to 8. Then it got down to 74-70 with 5 minutes left. And you're thinking, wow. I think Crowder sometime in the third quarter had 4 threes. It was I think he had 3 in that quarter, but 4 overall. Booker was still struggling. I wrote down 3 of 15 at the end of the third. But next thing you know, Giannis is going nuts. He had 29, with still 2 minutes left to play in the third. Holiday hit back-to-back threes as far as him shooting it. They didn't come, back-to-back every possession, but he hit a bunch of threes in a row. And you look up, and some of this had to do with Chris Paul being on the bench some of this run too. But you look up, it's a 16-0 run, 98-76, and you're just like, holy shit! Like, where did that lead go? Or where did that little 4-point game go? I should say, when you were saying where'd that 15-point lead of the Bucks go? And Giannis was just not to be denied. They did start to take advantage of anybody down low. Like I said, whether it's feeding him up close and I'm talking Giannis, or a cutter that would come in and be under the bucket. And the biggest thing is the pick and roll. I mean, they had Lopez out early in game 1 and I think even game 2 to an extent. And it didn't really matter who was coming in, whether it was Portis or whatever. They were putting people in that, dungeon of the pick and roll there, and they were getting exploited. Whereas this game, they were pressing overall, no matter who brought the ball up, because Chris Paul obviously brings the ball up a lot, but whoever brought it up, they were meeting them at half, if not sometimes full court, but right near the free throw line, they were on it. They were on the ball handler. They were clogging the driving lanes, and they just really put some stuff together that's got to give them, some pretty damn good confidence moving forward. 3 for 14, Booker ended up with only 10 points. That's obviously pretty crazy. Paul had a pretty good game, 19 and 9, 8 for 14. And Crowder ended up with 6. All of his points came, or pretty much all of his points, 6 of 7 from 3. That's pretty crazy. But even Johnson kind of faded with the 1 for 5 from 3. But man, Giannis, 41 points, 13 boards, 6 assists. Middleton hit threes. Holiday hit 5 threes. They just kind of put it all together and wouldn't stop. And we're talking about Giannis. I mean, there's some crazy numbers he's putting up right now. 34.3 points a game through 3 games, of course. 14 boards, 4.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.3 blocks. He's getting to the line 15 times a game, and he's shooting 62.5 from the field. And, you know, those first 2 games, we talked about how Chris Paul was part of the reason why that run happened beyond just getting hot, you know, sitting down for a couple of minutes. Giannis, for the first 2 games, though, when he played 75 minutes, it was +4. The 21 minutes that he sat, right, -27. So they definitely need every little bit. But even in the second game that they lost, to put up that 20-something, I think it was a 20-point quarter, Kobe and LeBron, it hadn't been done that. There's only like 3 or 4 people in the last 25 years in a finals quarter. I mean, Giannis is just going ape shit, dude. And we got to give him a lot of credit. And, you know, it's for good reason. You can be tough on the coach, as we know. Also, just through 3 quarters, 30 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. You're looking at Jordan, James, and Durant in the finals. And so that's over the last 25 years. I mean, the numbers are just crazy with him. But it's actually turning into some quality basketball at times, a good chunk of times in the first 2 games. But it all kind of came together last night for the role players as well. And Holiday, who's really needed to bust out, did with those 5 threes. And like I said, Middleton was on his game. It was just a solid performance. There wasn't going to be much, even if Paul got brought in a couple minutes earlier, that 16-0 run just put the game away.
Yeah, it did. And you saw people mention, like, the free throws, how Giannis shot more than the Suns did. But that's not something really worth talking about. And the only reason I mention that is because if you're a basketball fan, that's pretty much almost a trend you see in every single series, especially finals, where the Suns had more free throws in games 1 and 2. Milwaukee's going to come out to be the more physical team at home game 3. And what do you know? Milwaukee shoots more free throws in game 3. Like, even the fact that, like, ESPN still mentions those articles, it's like that's just such a regular basketball trend.
One guy getting the line 17 times, shooting more than the other team, that doesn't always happen.
No, you're right. That doesn't happen. But the fact that the Bucks had 10 more free throws than the Suns is just kind of regular. Now, and to give Giannis credit, because it's funny you mentioned LeBron and Kobe, because I was literally thinking as you were just talking about how if he could ever get that little sideline, baseline kind of Kobe MJ floater like the little LeBron, I mean, it's amazing how tough he is to guard, and he still is super young, I would say, relatively. If he could get a true jump shot, like, good Lord, because he's not quite the Jordan, LeBron, Kobe skill set of a pure shooter, but athletically, I mean, the dude he's a little bit quicker than LeBron just because he's just not quite as super muscular. But like the capability of him doing whatever he wants to do is just, it's ridiculous. Because I mean, it's like the Suns play incredible GOAT defense, but their defense isn't bad. They've played good defense all year. Mm-hmm. And this dude,
some of them are tough shots, you know. It's not. Yeah, you're right.
And clearly, it's not like Monty Williams, who all of a sudden forgot how to coach. It's like, oh, guys, we're just gonna let Giannis do his thing. Like, you're going against a legit team, and the dude is just dropping 40, and there's really no way to stop it. Like, I mean, again, he doesn't quite score like a Durant or a Harden, but what he's been doing for a guy that truly, his 3-point shot is not the worst thing in the league, but it's definitely, he doesn't shoot it that consistently, that confidently. Like last night, he was 0 for 2. You know, I've seen him hit a couple throughout the playoffs, but he's developing his skills. his free throw shooting has actually last night he was 13 to 17, and people were thinking in Philly, like, people were maybe getting to his head, and was he going to like crumble and fall? Like, was he going to be able to do it? So, I shouldn't say Philly. I should say Brooklyn.
Atlanta.
Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So, credit to him. Like, the dude's putting everyone on his back. He's doing all he can. Again, for all we know, he comes off as likable guy. He's good for the sport, good for the media. Like, the guy deserves credit. Whether Milwaukee wins the title or not this year, he's definitely moving up that rank of like the elite players in the league, where he already was. But I think he's just kind of even going now a step up above
Solidifying.
That's a perfect term. Solidifying how he is a true elite a top 5 to 6 player in the league on most given nights. And the fact that Middleton has been about as a consistent player as he could be. I'm sure if I went through every single box score, Chris, of these playoffs, he would have had an off night. But the dude has been about as good as you can be. Because, hell, LeBron and Curry have off night. Like, everyone has off nights.
Yeah, but he's been steady.
He's been about as damn steady
way
as he
up,
can be.
In those other games when Giannis wasn't there, too.
So, yeah, it's interesting. We did talk about how when the Bucks played Atlanta, how we were kind of looking for role players on Milwaukee just to step up, just because that's a common theme for good teams. And I think we've seen it's kind of been a back and forth since the end of that Atlanta series up until now. Bobby Portis and Lopez have really kind of just solidified that little extra piece that team needs. Or not they necessarily have to need it, but they've been there. Like last night, Bobby Portis was plus 19. I mean, I know it's going a little bit back, but ever since that Atlanta series wrapped up with Giannis being on the bench, Brook Lopez has stepped his game a bit more. And I know he's been off the court a little bit, but we talked about how on a given night, Chris, it's been rare to see Giannis, Middleton, and Jrue Holiday all have good games together. Portis and Lopez have really done their part to just kind of chip in, which is something the team needed a little bit, because besides those names, the rest of their bench last night was, not much. Like, Giannis's brother played for 2 minutes. Nwara, a guy, played for 1 minute. Teague is not what he used to be. Connaughton, he played for 30 minutes, had 8 points. So, you've been getting production, and that's something you need, because when we did do the preview series of this show, or of these finals, I mentioned about like 7 or 8 guys in the Suns who've been pretty much solid the whole playoffs. Like, they've had kind of a role player's delight. Monty Williams has been able to kind of go to his bench throughout the whole playoffs and just put people in, and they've really not missed the beat. So you're seeing the Milwaukee players step up when they have to. And again, to flip this to the Phoenix side, just to kind of reflect on what they're probably looking at. And you get the cliche bullshit of, well, we're going to come out more ready for game 4. Sure, they are. I'm sure they will. I don't think Phoenix didn't come out ready game 3. I just think Milwaukee was probably destined to win that game. But Bridges had 4 points. That's probably not going to happen again. And Devin Booker had his worst shooting performance of the playoffs. He was 3 of 14, 1 of 7, and Monty Williams just said, screw it, I'll let you sit out the fourth quarter. You just let him get rested, save his knees a bit. So if you're a Phoenix Sun player, again, you're up 2-1. You're still sitting good. Last night you shot nearly 50%. So, that's nothing to be ashamed of. And you maybe could be a little more aggressive and go to the line a little bit more and try to get some fouls. But again, as I just said a few minutes ago, when you're playing a game 3 on the road, you're normally going to not win the free throw battle. So it was a loss. They did get that gut punch on that late run the Bucks had in the second half, but you're still up in the series. You did lose Sarge by injury, but everything else still looking pretty good health-wise. Like, I expect next game I would be blown away if Milwaukee does win, if they won by double digits. I'm not saying the Bucks can't win. They've been like I said, a hell of a home team this year. But the Suns have also been a team where, okay, you punched us once.
What are they, 8-1 now? I think 8-1 or something like that.
But damn, they almost always come back firing. This is a team where I really thought they were gonna lose to. I thought they were gonna wrap up Game 5 and knock out the Clippers to make it to the finals, and they got punched.
Right.
But in Game 6, they're like, dude, F it. Like, we're wrapping this shit up. And same thing with the Lakers. I know I'm kind of tying these all together, but that when they close out the Lakers, like Jay Crowder and Booker had like 7 threes in the first quarter. So this is a team who, Chris, when they have gotten beat, a majority of the time they've come back with a even stronger performance off their off night. So you would expect Game 4 to be competitive. I'm not saying it's like go bet the house and
Sure.
the whole kitchen sink on Milwaukee, but I would be blown away. I'd be shocked if Milwaukee did win Game 4 by double digits. Just from what we've seen from this Suns team throughout the whole playoffs, where you lose one, fine, we'll come back and win the next one, and we'll get right back out. We'll get our foot back on your throat. So, but yeah, you're right. We have a Game 4 that's fun. If this was a 3-0 series, all of a sudden in the back of your head, you're thinking, damn, now the series, the luster and desire of it kind of like falls away because what are the odds of the team? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And another thing is, like you said, those early threes, like they would put the stomp in early, like at half, they'd be up by like 18. You know what I mean? Now, obviously, they were, this Milwaukee team isn't missing any star. Knock on wood. We shouldn't even talk about this right now because we're going to end up jinxing it. Giannis, I don't even want to say that. I'll stop. But we do have to put that into the equation of all these ones that you just said closing out. They did close out a team without some of their best players. So that's what I'm hoping. As a fan, I hope this thing goes Game 6, Game 7. A little bit more on that, like, yeah, we haven't had a tight game down the stretch yet. So my guess is, just off odds in Game 4, watching enough, am I the biggest X and O's guys? No. But just watching enough sports, I would call for a tight game down the stretch. And whether that means with 4 minutes left, 3 minutes left, it's basically tied or close. That's what I mean. I mean, I do think we're going to get a good game. Saying that, I wouldn't be shocked if it went to overtime or something like that. So I do think we'll get a really good game. Speaking of Lopez, though, he had a good kind of start to the Game 1, and I can't remember if the other points came a little later when it didn't 100% count. I don't remember that, but the last 2 games, not that he's been, Game 2, he was pretty much a no-show. Last night, he only played 20 minutes. Some of that is Portis, though, obviously. But there was this stat going into the series. There was top 2 shooters in the restricted area, right? So the best shooter in the league in the playoffs, the postseason, in the restricted area was Brook Lopez. Overall, this tweet says from Elder Johnson, he says, it's Marquise Johnson, Elder is his real name. Overall, he hasn't taken many shots in this area during the postseason, 59 in 17 games, but he is the leader, 83% shooting and 8 and 79.6. And that obviously makes a lot of sense because, especially Game 2, how many lobs in Game 1, how many lobs he got. So that obviously helps that. There was something if it kept going, I was going to scorch the coach there over for the Bucks. The starting unit in Game 1 played 9 minutes together, and it was only outscored by 2. We went over that stat when we hung out last week. But I do, Marshall, think that this will come down to the last few minutes with a close enough game within 4 to 5 points that the ball game's on the table for somebody to take. And when it's in that scenario, it's tough not to side with especially Chris Paul, but also Booker coming off a bad shooting game.
Yeah, to wrap this up, I'm with you. I think that, as I was just saying a couple minutes ago, I do think it'll be close, but I do think the Suns win. I think they're the better team, and it's going to take a hell of a performance to knock out this Milwaukee crowd, but I do think they find a way to get it done. And then you have the place that's going to be going absolutely insane of a potential Game 5 for Phoenix at home to win a title. So I think that's how it goes. But if Giannis keeps dropping 40, he's going to make me look like a damn fool. And
if Holiday goes back to back to back with threes, it's like, okay, there's Holiday.
I mean, I'm making my pick, but Giannis, someone's got to try to slow the man down. But again, it's a maturation of a star player, and there's still time for maturation to go. And I think, and I know it's completely random, but I think we're going to be having the same kind of chat about a guy named Luka, like in years to come. I could see, I don't know why, but just of comparing people to people. I think in 3 to 4 years, we'll be having the same chat about him. I know it's a different story, but
Yeah, different player. He gets people involved, but he's a much better shooter, but he's nowhere near the defender. You know what I mean? So, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it just has that superstardom taking over skills, and that's what Giannis is.
Yeah.
And it's just been fun. But I do think I think that they'll, as an underdog, win, because Milwaukee was a 4.5 point favorite, and I'm sure they'll be, give or take, probably 4 to 6 point favorite again for Game 4. But I think the Suns, as the underdogs, find a way to scrape one out. And then in Game 5, I mean, Giannis is probably going to then drop 40 again for sure, because in my situation, the season will be on the line. He'll do his part. But, man, that'll be fun. And, again, I could care less about the ratings. I know that there's not a Lakers team or LeBron or Curry, but like you said, we're seeing pretty good basketball. These are two teams that we can maybe see again next year. It's good. It's good marketing for a guy like Giannis or Chris Paul or Booker and Middleton. Like, there's a lot of positives. I'm sure maybe the ratings aren't matching other prior seasons, but it's a good finals. It's a fun finals. It's different teams, and if people are if the random Joe who doesn't care about basketball is watching the finals, like, that doesn't really harm us much. Like, it's been a fun competitive deal, and we're talking about a series that could go back to Phoenix 2-2, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of mixed with that because the ratings were way up. We knew no matter what, they're going to be up from the bubble just because of
Sure.
that. We all know that. But the ratings through the postseasons, through the first 2 rounds, were way up, and they were very close to 2019. And some of the games went back to 2018. Some of the matchups, like Golden State and Houston for a couple games in a row, were actually very popular because they had built that rivalry from the year before when they were up on them 3-2, and so everybody is like, "Oh, this is a good game." Casual fans, but as it went down the stretch here in the conference finals, and you had a double dip of star injuries in that Atlanta-Milwaukee, right? So that kind of does hurt the casual fan, and also not having Kawhi. That did hurt it in the markets to an extent too, of course. But in Game 1, a lot of people didn't know. I mean, we surely didn't think Giannis was going to be ready for Game 1. But a lot of people didn't even know he played, and so the problem with the conference finals is it kind of slowly became a buzzkill for your casual fan. We were watching them, we were entertained, but it did kind of have a downturn, basically. And you could see in the first game of this series, the ratings were still up from the bubble, but they were down drastically, or somewhat, pretty damn drastically, from 2019 to 2018. Now, Game 2, the viewership hasn't came out just yet on Game 3, but Game 2 did take a nice boost. It definitely did. It is the highest rated since 2019 game in general. And it really was a lot healthier than last year. It was up 41% and coming closer to the 2019 range. But once again, that one's tough too. You know what I mean? That one's a little weird too, because it's like, well, like I said, I think it peaked at 11 million or 11.1 million. So like I said, it's still a big number and whatnot, but a lot of people didn't even know that Giannis was playing. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, he did? And then you can see, okay, now it boosted. Now I really want to see, when you're watching the game and it was a tight game going in, deeper into that third, it'll be interesting to see what that rating says. And I'm guessing that'll buck up. And if it goes back 2-2, well, 5, 6, 7, we're going to see, okay, Giannis is back. Not only is Giannis back, but it's hard not to scroll on Twitter or see it on ESPN, or his stat line the last 2 games have been ridiculous. So I really think that's going to be like, okay, wow, okay. You know, it is funny though. A lot of people say, oh, we got new teams and this is great. This is finally refreshed, you know. But then you look at the ratings, and go, are you sure? Because people like to see dominance, just like the Bulls for all those years. No one really thought anyone would beat the Bulls, but they kept watching the shit. You know, it is what it is. Americans love dominance. That's just how it goes. That's just how it goes. And we had such a weird run of LeBron being in the finals for so long, along with that Golden State Curry popularity. So no matter who they were facing, they were going to tune into those two teams. So that helped them a lot with ratings, and they had ratings they hadn't had in a long time too. So we got to remember that. But we've also said that next year it will build rivalries. I mean, a Suns-Lakers conference final next year will be off the chain. A game 7, we got a great series with the Bucks in Brooklyn. You know, they're healthy. That's going to be different. So, it's last night probably really helped because it was a good game until it wasn't. But I think that, you know, people now know it's 2-1. Giannis is fully healthy. I do think that will ramp it up, and hopefully that does ramp it up in general. Any overall thoughts or last couple of things you want to talk about before we shut this down here, sir?
I'd say I'm good. Like I said, I'm thinking this thing goes 5. I think that.
So you're sticking with your original prediction.
I'm going to stick with 5, and it's going to be tough, but I think that the Suns win the next 2, and then Chris Paul gets a trophy where a lot of people seem, especially this past year, a lot of people seem to be saying the guy deserves the title for the career he's had, so it would be a nice fitting way for him to go out. We'll see. Again, Giannis is going to probably do his part and try to score 40 every game, but I think the Suns somehow pull out these next 2.
And I'm still okay. I wouldn't put the house on it like you said earlier, but I'm still okay with my game 6 Suns, because even if they don't win, you know, you never know. The Bucks may beat them and push a game 6, but either way, I'm just happy that we're not sitting at 3-0.
And on that note, we will be back. We'll be breaking this down because, like I said, we're kind of halfway through the series. In a way, you could view it halfway as mathematically. So until then, thanks as always for the support. Thanks for listening. They are giving those guys a little extra time. You will be seeing Game 4 Wednesday night, not Tuesday, but Wednesday night. They'll be tipping up
Saturday, right?
Yeah,
Wednesday and Saturday.
They'll be tipping it up in Milwaukee with their 48,000 people within a half block of where the basketball court is. And hey, credit to them. Do that because not every fan base is like that.
I don't want to give too much credit for anything to do with Wisconsin, okay? But yeah, I do give them credit. They are great fans. They're, you know, we can go into further, but we won't. But yeah, they are. They support their teams, like them or not. They definitely do.
So until then, have a great evening. Keep enjoying your summer of July fun in the sun. The boys are out tonight. Peace.